everyone, welcome back to our podcast, Superpower and Sidekick. I'm Kim Ang.
And I'm Cinda Kay. And we meet every week to meet and greet with spirit and work with spirit to live a life beyond our imagination.
Yes. And I know you have a subject today, Cinda, that you want to talk about, so go for it.
There's been a couple that have actually been coming and tapping on me, and we'll see which ones come out and which ones hit and which ones don't. But, we never, just disclaimer, we don't necessarily always know what's going to come up. This seems to be a different topic than what I was thinking. I'm going to talk about channeling for a second because that is probably my main wheelhouse. And what I do is I interpret invisible beings and am a spirit medium. So it can be someone that crosses over. It might be a higher being, ascended master, starseed, energetic, multidimensional beings that are without a body. And they can work with us to help us to see things that our conditioned perspective here in our current patriarchal society we might miss. So by channeling spirit and working with spirit, we can see and find things and opportunities and live a bigger life than the small life that we may have been conditioned. People don't realize that we've actually been conditioned to live small. And working with spirit changes that. And not only are we trained to work small, if we're not small, then we should feel guilt and shame about it. If we have gregarious personalities, maybe, or we dress a little bit on the wacky side, or maybe we don't fit gender specific roles, or, somehow or another, we are coloring outside of the lines. And to do that, it's almost imperative to work with that inner being of light to be able to navigate it, because we don't have the paved railway. We don't have the railways. We don't have the superhighways. We don't have any of the infrastructure really to live that kind of a life. It is very much so normal people. It's only current avenues. So some of us who are a little bit wackier, maybe a little bit more empathic, a little bit more sensitive, how do we navigate this very conditioned world? And one of the things that I discovered pretty early on, this was actually in my early 20s. My mother likes to pick arguments sometimes, or every almost conversation. And she was trying to do that. And instead of just retorting back in my conditioned response, I actually went to spirit and said, if I say that what I want to say, I'm going to leave out of here. We're never going to talk again. I just see problems and I see everything igniting and exploding. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. And I surrendered it to spirit in that moment. And when I did, the words that came out of my mouth were so inspired, and nothing that I could have ever come up with my own. She was trying to tell me my dad would never love me the way I wanted to be loved. And what I ended up doing, rather than arguing against her or defending him or why are you being catty in the first place, I just said, you know what, Mom, you're right. I never have been loved the way I wanted to be loved, by him, by you, by my husband, heck, even myself. So not only did it give me an answer that, first off, completely shut her up. I'd never seen that since or before. But it also sent me on a life quest. I saw what I was missing in a deeper way than what she was trying to say. And so in a way, it almost challenged me to change my life in ways that I could have never foreseen. But all of that came from one moment of surrendering to spirit and asking what it would have me do. Because I called myself, I had a Wizard of Oz analogy for a few years, a long time. And I got stuck in Scarecrow forever because, I went into Dorothy and I went, okay, yeah, I am a little bit lost, but I think I can find home. I don't know, it just didn't jive with me at the time, and I just jumped into Cowardly Lion. I went, oh no, no, I'm courageous. I got lots of courage, and I went to the Tin Man, and I went, nope, got lots of heart. But then I checked out the Scarecrow and went, oh my gosh, every little piece of information in my head was put in by someone else or something else, and none of it came from me. And I started seeking what was between all of that. So rather than trusting my own conditioned mind, which I knew I was not seeing through at that time, I reached out and asked for spirit to help me to navigate it in a different way. And then but the difficult step was the surrender and not putting my words in there and what I would like to say, or the reactionary because my emotions are speaking this, or any of that, of actually seeking a higher wisdom.
Okay, so then how would you try to implement that in your daily life to make it so that your connection and your ability to channel is more productive, I guess. That's what
And clear. That was something I
yeah.
was worried about in the beginning was, and one of the things I have accepted that no matter what, my filter is going to be there. And remember that there are other people that will resonate to that, and it's okay on some levels because if we are in the human body, we've got some conditioning, we've got some filterage going on there. So we have to accept some of that. But I also wanted to really know how to step aside and let it come through as clearly as possible without my own conditioning coming through it and my perspective. So some of the things that I started doing is through the classes that you and I took, we learned a lot of different spiritual practices and energetic practices, and what I like to call active meditations. So, every day I actively visualize connecting to source and do several different practices with my chakras, other things I've learned through yoga. And, it's all kind of mixed and recreated and regurgitated through me. But definitely have a daily practice every single day that I connect to my source and not only connect, but go ahead and take that moment then to surrender to the higher wisdom and knowledge that I might not have. And I think this is probably the most important point whenever I was really learning intuition and how to channel spirit, that I had to set what I thought I know aside. So even though I'm a little bit of a jack of all trades, I am extremely creative. I've made a lot of things and done a lot of different types of jobs in my life. I'm a very capable human being on many levels, but I remembered that, I've also had enough tutorage and helping from other people that even though I knew how to do something, I may have done it 20 times. Another person, in the kitchen, for instance, have a friend walk up from Bulgaria and go, there's an easier way of doing that. And they come in and show you something that you thought you had it down, and they show you a way that just blows your mind. It happens more often than not if you are sitting on the floor and humble to any degree. So that was probably the main point with spirit. The know how matter how much I thought I know, I might not know. Or there might be another perspective that I can't see from because all of us humans have blinders on.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of comes with this feeling that you just need to feel like you're right. Like how you're having an argument with someone.
And that actually brings me to the other topic that I wanted to talk about is right now myself and some other leaders and real contributors to the spiritual community. Many of us at a very young age were called by what I don't know how else to describe it, the divine feminine. For myself, it was Mary Magdalene. For another close friend of mine, it was also Mary Magdalene. We're talking about in our teens. Several friends have told me Isis, but it's not necessarily the avatar so much as it is the divine expression of the spiritual energies. And it's not to go to necessarily the feminine, it's because we've been so out of balance with only the patriarchal for so long. Part of that wanting to be right is the masculine way of viewing the world, and we've been extremely conditioned to it. Not only right, but it comes from something a little bit deeper than that, and it's a forced perfectionism. Like, if you're not perfect, you're damaged good and you are no longer worthy or valuable. And it actually cuts us off from that divine source and that divine, because she is more of a feminine energy, receptive. Being right is not receptive. It is an completely action mind. So it is definitely of the masculine flavor. Nothing at all wrong with it as long as you have it balanced with the feminine aspects as well. And right now in society and within our own beings, that has been conditioned out of us. And I really am seeing a huge resurgence in the divine feminine arts. For myself, I love tarot. I've been reading tarot now since I was 23. I'm 55, so 32 years. And what else? I picked up a drum recently and I'm fixing to start learning it, because vibrational energetic healing was something that was known about pretty well worldwide. That's another thing I was going to say. Not only are a lot of people being called back to this feminine aspects of spirituality and starting to blend it back out and balance everything, but also a lot of the ancient cultures that have been silenced on this planet are starting to sprout back up, and we're starting to hear them not only in the cosmos and the invisible, but also back into the physical world. And a lot of us are feeling a lot more called to those types of ways of viewing spirituality than some of the ways that have honestly been force fed. And if you don't believe in that way, it was, you hear a lot about the different patriarchal religions saying that they had to overcome some kind of ostracizing in the society, but I have also seen them turn around and do a lot of ostracizing within the society. um, Especially, witches are viewed evil. Witches were never evil. The women that were killed during the Inquisition and through the Christian takeover of the planet was violent and messy and anything but compassionate and loving. That's the other thing, is a lot of these patriarchal type things are forceful and don't allow people to have their free will and choice. Where we talk about freedom, do we actually know what that is? If you're completely conditioned, do you even know what you want in order to have freedom?
Not really right now. It's all what they're being fed to believe what freedom is.
You can see it in the toxicity. Everyone right now is talking about the toxicity of society, and until we put it through a different lens and realize that society has been unbalanced for several thousand years now, that we need to bring in the part that was forcefully and violently removed. And the feminine aspects of nature and of humanity were villainized. The symbol of the snake, for instance, that's a beautiful one of them. One of the things I want to talk about was symbology. And the symbol of the snake in ancient times was extremely divine in nature, but it's talking about our own connection to source and the kundalini, and the kundalini is seen as a snake at the base of our pelvis. So, but that has been ostracized and villainized in The snake in that, it's always a bad thing. The snake is a bad thing, when actually snake is all about regeneration. That whenever you do get enough growth to the point that it's time to shed an old skin, you don't have to keep all those crumbly parts of yourself going forward. You're allowed to release them and let go, which is also a feminine trait, by the way.
Well, I've been discussing a lot about emotional intelligence, and I feel like that kind of is in line with what you're saying about like feminine energy. So when you were talking about matriarchy at one point, you were saying it's like, well, you know, whereas patriarchy they try to fix you, whereas in matriarchy it's like, here, have a cup of tea, sit down, tell me what's wrong. And I feel like this talk of emotional intelligence is like the need to kind of, you know, like it's a I don't know how to explain it. It's like it's a moving part, you know, where you don't try to force your ideology on someone or tell them that they're wrong or that you're right and that your advice is the best, but it's more about listening and empathy and making sure that that person is seen,
And
right?
allowing.
And allowing, yes, the space
There's
for
something
that.
about allowance for our
Mm-hmm.
beings. There's a feminine quality about creating space for humanity, and we recognize that we're going to have ugly days as well as beautiful days. And we understand nurturing, and that someone might need a hug that day, and that doesn't make them a snowflake, or whatever else. There are so much propaganda against almost every feminine quality in our society right now. It is so villainized. I'm so surprised that any one of us can even claim, hey, we're women. Why didn't we all just transition? It's easier in this world. Um, joke, people, joke. But but there, it's a joke, and it's serious, because how many of our female archetypes in the last 2,000 years had to pretend to be a man in order to do what they did in this world? There's a whole history about that. So I really do believe a lot of what is the toxicity on the planet isn't so much what's here, it's what's missing. That we have to, I think, for it to actually truly be healed, is also acknowledge that it was taken away from us violently. Because I do think they go hand in hand. And until people, I don't know how often I hear, oh, but witches are evil. Cinda, why would you even want to? And I'm like, okay, but maybe you've been misinformed. What if they were the healers? What if they were the shamans? What if they were the ones that understood vibrational healing? What if they were the ones that knew how to give someone space to? Our bodies are amazing on how they can heal ourselves if we're in a place, the environment that allows it to do so. And women are historically better of creating that space than what a man is. And it's nothing even against the man. And it's not saying that they couldn't nurture that aspect of themselves, because I think everybody has all of those different aspects within ourselves. A lot of anger is that we have had so much patriarchal shoved down us that we don't have any matriarchal, the feminine, just to balance it out, just so that the aggression is balanced by the compassion.
Yeah, there's so much toxicity right now. It's
It's
everywhere
hard to
you
be in
look.
the planet right now in some
It
ways. And at
is.
the same time, I think we're at a turning point, and it's one of the most exciting times to be on the planet. Sometimes I cycle through that all in one day a few times. Because while I see something falling, and it is messy and it is nasty and it is yucky and it is toxic, I also see something really beautiful rising, and I see women coming together and supporting each other. Not just that, but supporting their men in their lives, for them overcoming the toxicity of the conditioning that's been, and men are starting to be able to allow to have emotions. How can we be emotionally mature when we're not even supposed to have emotions? That if we have anger, you have to feel shame and guilt and shove that down. How are we going to have any emotional stability or health if we're not even allowed to feel our emotions fully? And that includes our joy. I don't know how many joy killers are out there in the world, but man, there's some joy killers out in the world. If you feel envious of another person, turn it around and be inspired instead. If that speaks to you on that level, it's because it's calling to you, but the conditioned world told you, no, you can't do that. So you have this belief system of, oh, I can't do that. And then you envy the person that's doing it. That is also part of this patriarchal conditioning that we are living.
Yeah, you envy them and then you try to shove them down too at the same time. It's like you're judging them, right?
We can't stand to see anybody happy if we're not.
Yeah.
And it's gotten so much of the independence of we have to be perfect in this world in order to have any value, that we don't even value ourselves on any level. And it shows because we don't value others. When somebody else is talking to you like that, trust me, they don't value themselves. They have zero self-value. Because someone who has self-value sees the value in you. We are absolutely mirrors. And as much as some people would try to say that that's just woo-woo, you try to run from your self-conscious and see if it doesn't show up face after face after face.
Yeah. Yeah, I have this thing now lately where if I see somebody posting a negative comment or like even amongst my own family, somebody's complaining or about something, and I would just jokingly say, "Don't be a hater just because blank, you know, just because you can't do that or something." And it's like a joke, but it's like trying to get that person to realize, there's no need for you to be hateful because of someone else's happiness.
I call it offering another perspective. You know what? I see it different. I see it this way. And I try to do it as compassionately and lovingly as I possibly can. But some days it's a little both happen. And but also, I had a friend recently tell me, because there was a couple episodes back that I was having a bad day, and I was really feeling the dehumanization in the world, and it got to me. And I ended up having a conversation from someone else on a completely other thing, but we went there, and she said, Cinda, give yourself a hug and go, thank you. I'm part of humanity. That matters. That the dehumanization of another person hurts me. That's not I shouldn't judge myself. I shouldn't feel guilty for that. I shouldn't have shame that I triggered and got upset because I felt compassion for somebody else. But we've been conditioned to do that.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point because, yeah, sometimes I feel like, I'm just so pissed off when somebody, tries to tear someone else down. I mean, you look at social media and all this stuff, and it's just like, why, and it hurts me. Yeah.
But that just means that your humanity, your empathy, your compassion, it's intact. It's working, it's functioning. You are not so disassociated and that's what the world wants us to be. They want us to be so desensitized to sexual aggression, to coercion, to perfectionism, to control. And they want us desensitized to all of these things. So if you're still feeling that, you are still a functioning human being and they did not succeed.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's important to call out those people who do that and dehumanize others, just so that you're taking a stand and saying, I'm not gonna stand for that.
The woman that I was talking with, it was a completely different experience than mine, but she had walked into a board meeting and one of the guys makes a joke, "Oh, you sure have put on some weight." And he dehumanized her as she walked through the door. And she called it out. And the main thing was that she had called it out, and it created a whole thing because how dare you make a buzz? Because it's also peer pressure in the room, like, shh. How much has silence been used against us because it's don't air your dirty laundry in public? How much has that been used for the actual predators? How often does it actually serve a victim? That silence. So how much of society's unspoken rules are actually to silence us so we don't speak up about the perpetrator?
Well, and even if you say something like that in a joking way, it's not a joking. It's not meant to be a joke.
Right? I wish I'd have had the education on narcissism that we can get on social media today. Because it's shown so many of these manipulative tactics that education, it's hard to not see it when it's happening now. And that might in and of itself change our society as we know it, because a lot of the tactics that have worked up to now to take people's power are no longer going to work. I highly recommend anyone that's been in an emotional abusive relationship to actually read up on narcissism and what gray rock is. How, people that use your heart against you, well, how do you not give them the ammo to do it? There's all kinds of information now that was not available to me when I was floundering in some of these relationships. But some of them are so normalized in our society that we don't even know we're allowed to speak up for ourselves within those relationships, because they don't have to be romantic. It can be parental. It can also be child. It can also be your boss. It can also be someone who works for you. These kind of, there is a lot of this kind of dynamic, and I actually don't fault either side. And I have a strange viewpoint on that because I actually see either side is a symptom of the unbalanced society that they come from. That both sides are actually conditioned and groomed into them as children. And some of this is how we see gender roles. And I'm not necessarily speaking up for, I don't want to open that topic of conversation necessarily, but how women are always, oh, you're a nurse, you're a teacher, you're this, that, and boys, you're violent this or you're violent that, or something like this. But that we are actually starting it from childhood in children and don't see that we're doing it. But it goes even beyond that. But the more that we understand these toxic traits in our society and within ourselves, because I guarantee you we've all done them. There's not one person who hasn't pulled at least one of them at one point or another. But it's more about, well, is there, I was talking about spirit. Is there a better way to do it? Should we just keep repeating habits because they've been done for so long and they've been done for generations and generations? Or are we going to start learning how to actually communicate and have relationships that are fulfilling rather than everyone living in hell all the time? And, you know, oh, well, what I think Spirit's been giving it to us all along. I don't think I asked. I think Spirit was telling me before I knew to ask. That's actually what the point was, is that, because of some childhood grooming in my own life, and I was a promiscuous teen, but another way to say it is I was a groomed teen. That the first person, spiritual, I felt was Mary Magdalene because of the way she's portrayed, which I don't even actually agree with, and I don't believe that's actually the truth at all. I think she was actually a very powerful woman, and so they had to degrade her and make her the prostitute. I don't think she's actually a prostitute. I think they've actually mixed up names, and there's more Marys, and there's confusion going on. But that's not even the point. I don't believe that Eve came from a rib. I think that's a complete mistranslation, and I think it was translated by a misogynist person that had thought he had the right to mistranslate that. But that's not the point. The point was is I started getting my intuition started turning me towards that divine feminine right away in my own when I started seeking spiritually. And I was open to having a Jesus moment. I'd had one when I was 13 and I was all for continuing it. And I actually have a good relationship with Jesus, so to speak. But I started having feminine archetype and knowledge start coming to me and actually calling for me. And whenever I'd gone through a really, really hard moment in my life, Tarot came in and actually started answering some of my questions on these toxic emotional things and how I could overcome grief and shame and other things that were put on me in order to control and groom me. I had zero self value when I came to the table. Zero. Uh, Negative.
I think a lot of us are like that, don't have that self value. It's a generational thing that's been passed down to us.
In society, feminine are not feminine value, feminine thing, whatever, you know, that makes that up is not valued. And not only that, it's dehumanized, devalued, and a lot of other things. You know, because of some things that happened to me in my teenage years, I really thought I was damaged goods and I was going to hell. And there was within that community, there was no redemption. There was no way home. And I found it in what they would call evil things. But I found that redemption. I will never forget the moment that I really learned how to connect energetically. And when I did, I felt the love that came back to me and realized that there was absolutely nothing I could ever do that would stop that stream of love. So, no matter what anybody had ever told me, and the reason why I felt so much guilt, shame, and no self value was untrue completely. And the whole reason I felt this is because I didn't think I was worthy of the divine, because they told me I wasn't, because of things that had happened to me or that I had chose to done after these things had happened to me. And that was a complete fallacy, because when I did find my connection to the divine, it was a much more feminine aspect. It is not how the Christian system is necessarily based. But when I found that love within me, it was so big. It was so, I wish everybody could experience it, because they would never, ever believe someone telling them that they were going to go to hell again. And I do believe it's available to every person on the planet. But I do think that most of the ways that actually get us there were removed forcibly from the planet.
Yeah, and I think that when we are channeling that energy and that love, it radiates out and people will feel that. Because I remember my nephew, I think he was like 8 or 9 at the time, and we had a family gathering, and everybody was leaving, and he went to hug me, and he says, and he hugs me, and he says, how come every time I hug you, you feel so light like sunshine? And it's like, oh, it's like, you know and I feel like, yeah, children, they're so innocent and so not, you know um what
Conditioned.
you call it, not conditioned yet. They're still pure and innocent, and so that's why they can, that that energy, they can feel it easier than adults do.
I saw a meme that I say, said it so well the other day. Someone said, you know how animals get the zoomies? All of our cats and dogs get, how come humans don't get the zoomies? And someone answered, because it was knocked out of us in elementary school.
Mm.
And that touches on another thing. In the Western, they took us away from nature and put us in culture. And they, every Aboriginal, every tribal type of community, they completely wiped out on this planet for us to be not savages, but of culture. When they did that, they also took all of our right to sing, dance, and play instruments. Basically, they took it away from us and said only the people that are good are going to do it, and they're going to go get on stage and you can watch them. But if you look at every other society on the planet that has not been westernized, everybody sings, dances, and plays instruments. And no one is even ever told they suck, ever. And the entire community takes part in it. And it's funny that you brought that up, because it helped me remember that was one of the things that I mentioned, that I think that's going to, I believe, I feel called to, and I'm not the only one, that part of healing our society is bringing all of this back for everybody, and not just having whoever's on stage to idolize and bow down to. That if, that drumming is a very beautiful way to help heal your own frequency. And instead of going and having a drink, that you can rebalance if you feel out of balance. Dancing, one of the best ways to come out of, how many of us in our society are stuck in fight or flight? Jiggling and dancing is one of the best ways to come out of that and to go back into our parasympathetic nervous system. And that, talking about healing and all of this, we are all in that go, 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 go. And our parasympathetic nervous system is completely fried. It's so stretched out. It's fraying, and the last little bit's about to give on most of humanity, I think, right now. And what kinds of things can we do to move from that state of chaos and anxiety and come back into that parasympathetic peace and comfort and relaxation? And not, I realize I worked within myself, because there's times I'll get triggered and I'm like, I'm waiting for that other shoe to drop. And always, but there's nothing going on in my life that I have anything to be worried about. And because I work with spirit, when there has been something coming, I've actually had a warning and a heads up that has helped me mitigate it literally almost every time. So why would I even worry? But we're so trained to do it. We are so trained to live in fight or flight. Because if we're in survival mode, we are not in creation mode. And that's been done on purpose. And that's also masculine, feminine right there. Survival, creation. And there's nothing wrong with either one of them in balance. I think they're both, I am not here to discount men or even the patriarchy itself if it's healthy. I just don't think it's healthy currently.
Very imbalanced, out of whack.
And it's like getting even more and more and
Yeah.
more. You know, people are like freaking out. No, this is the year. If you don't fix it, this is the year. It's like, okay, but I've been watching this happen for a very long time.
Yeah, I guess the message is just not worry what's happening on the outside. Like,
And how do we balance the waves? You know, I'm having some health issues. You're having some a little emotional turmoil. I'm having some emotional turmoil because how do you navigate physical without having some emotional? You know, and for myself, you know, not every day is perfect, and there are days that haven't been good here lately, but I do have a lot of um, ways of bringing spirit perspective in, which makes things way more bearable and navigatable than my life is without them.
well, we should just talk about death because I've been surrounded by the talk of death.
Exactly. That's just it. We come here with what, hey, anyone that's listening, if you've got it on there, I guarantee you comment, I will find it and we will talk about it. Because let's just talk about what we're going through. Um, but also death in our society has been villainized.
Villainized how? What do you mean
You
by
should
that?
fight against it.
Oh.
The pressure that's put on a cancer patient sometimes
Mm-mm-mm.
is
Mm-hmm.
unbelievable, and it's not healthy pressure at
Right.
all.
Right.
And there is some healthy, you know, fight and fight for yourself and fight for your life, and some of that can be healthy, but can also be pushed way unhealthy. And people deny death. People don't prepare for death. Um, and more importantly, what if you need to talk about it and there's no room or space to talk about it? But that's really what you need to talk about, because every single one of us is going to face it. And there is no running from it. And Western society does not give space in the room for death, in my humble opinion. Well, you know, how dare someone seek death? You suffer enough, you go through enough pain, and it sometimes it sounds a whole lot better than waking up in severe pain again. You know, first off, is if you don't know what it feels like to want it, consider yourself grateful, give yourself a hug, and know that you are one lucky being. You know, and it doesn't matter if it's physical, emotional, spiritual. There's a lot of ways where you just don't, it doesn't feel good here and don't want to be here. And I'm not validating suicide. That's not what I'm doing. But quality of life absolutely matters. And when people lose quality of life, they need to at least have the right to care, to be able to speak about what their wishes are. You know, I myself I have a DNR. I do not want to be resuscitated if something happens. And I think everybody has the right to make those decisions, those medical decisions about themselves. And people are not really allowed. We're just now getting it back. You hear about death doulas now. You hear about, you know, hospice is such a beautiful, loving, giving, compassionate career, because allowing someone a honorable death, one where you're not, you know, sometimes you lose body functions, and so no one needs to lose their humanity because of that. And so treating people humanely and, like, you know, treat them like they were in life and give them the space to die, that is a very sacred, and that's actually one of the things that we lost with our shamans, is that we have people to just go and sit with people and help them when they cross over, and that they cross over not being alone. I know for myself, some of the things that have really helped me to change my perspective. Every year I meditate at the beginning of the year, and I always get it around the Lunar New Year's. I get the message. But one year I got, my father, not my father, was going to pass away. And my dad's best friend ended up being in a front end collision and killed a few months later. And knowing that spirit knew that that was going to happen, complete accident, but they knew that was going to happen. That changed my perspective on death completely. It assured me that we all really, the Akashic records are real, and we do exist beyond and before and forever and always. And that when we come here, there's a day we leave here. But it really brought it home, because how could anybody on this planet know someone was going to be killed in a front end accident in 2 months? That, how much did that make me believe in my psychic abilities, and that I really am connected to something? Well, it's definitely divine, because when my own father was passing, and before he did, I was getting messages all along and help with it. And when it came time for him to leave, of that, most of the time I'm right there, but that was not one that I was equipped to do. For instance, I was the one there when my grandmother passed, and Lumen Dang was actually teaching us. Remember about he was teaching us that every single one of our cells has a soul, and the souls of our cells, right? Well, I'd gone to California, Orange County, and he'd talked all about it. And I'd flown home, and my suitcase was still on the floor. And I went to work, and I get the call that my grandmother's gone. She's no longer, coming awake, and that the death watch has started. And I immediately just run home, grabbed the same suitcase I'd gone to California with, threw my black suit on it, and took off and left. And we all took turns to sit with her during her last hours. Well, one morning I wake up and I knew I had to go in first. And I wasn't scheduled to go in till noon, but I knew I need to go get ready. I had to go in first. And right after I woke up, I hear my dad outside. He said, Cinda, I was with your grandmother at 2 o'clock this morning. Something invisible weirdness happened, and there's no way I can go. I'm supposed to go back, but I can't do it. Can you take my round? And I went, no worry, Dad. I already had the message. I'm on my way. And I went and relieved my uncle, which is another kind of cool story. But and whenever I did, I went to go transfer energy to her and send energy. It's similar to Reiki, but it's different, but energetic healing. And I sent energy to her, and as soon as I did, the energy returned and pushed me. I mean, there was a seat, and it forcibly sent me back, and I went, oh, she's really dying. And I knew she was dying. My hand was still out from putting it on her. And as I look at my hand and I look at her, we almost become one being. And I see every single one of the cells of her soul lifting up, the souls of her cells lifting up. I said it backwards. And then I see like another one like come through all of it. And it's almost a swirl through all the little lights. I know. And I can see my own hand and my own mixing in with hers as hers is lifting and coming out. And while this is happening over here on this side, I see a huge, that orange golden, I mean, I've never seen this light before. Oh my gosh, this light is something else. And when it came in the room, everything went and went with it. And I knew that that was the one. Her body. I actually hear in my head almost immediately, okay, but I don't want you to see the rest. And right then, the nurse comes in and said, "Can you please step out for just a minute? I need to roll her." And when the nurse did it, she breathed her last breath, and she passed away. but I know I was there at the moment that her soul went back to the divine being.
Oh yeah, totally. Ew, I get chills all over that part.
And
That's beautiful.
there is no denying when you experience something like that, you will never, ever, ever, ever there. And there's no way that my imagination made it up. It was so
Yeah.
moving and profound. And then the uncle that I relieved that day, I knew that he'd been sick. I knew he had Alzheimer's. I knew things had kind of gotten bad. And I knew he was at hospital, what I thought, in my old hometown in Clovis. And I'm up close to Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I was in the kitchen one day and I was cooking. And I get this very strong message from my father that he is in Albuquerque. And I went, is mom passing? You actually going to come help mom with as bad as she bad mouths you? I actually said that back to him. And I know my dad, he absolutely would. um, but I didn't necessarily get a message back or anything. But I get a call a couple hours later that my uncle had been transferred to Albuquerque and had passed away that night.
Mm.
And my dad had let me know he was there to help him when he crossed over the Rainbow Bridge. And then when my uncle's wife, my dad's actual sister, Aunt Ray, she had fallen and caused really bad head injury that she succumbed to. But she was, in her well into her 80s when this happened. It was just wasn't that long ago. But I had some similar things that had happened when my uncle did. But I had a huge clock that my dad had bought. My grandmother had macular degeneration and was partially blind, and so he bought her this huge clock. I had that clock on my wall, and that clock jumped off and fell off my wall and shattered. Literally the next minute, I get the text from my cousin that my aunt had just passed away.
Mm.
And my family will always kind of come and let me know that they're
Mm.
here on the other side to help. And all of those kind of things. I mean, I've shared with you that one of my first mediumship, just ran into a woman that was grieving her son, and he was there, and she
Mhm.
wasn't interested. But next thing you know, the story that I shared, he had done this. We both hiked the Tongariro Crossing in New Zealand. There is
Mhm.
no way I could have known that, and that it was going to touch her the way that it did, and all of this
Mhm.
kind of stuff. So just
Yeah.
because of the mediumship and how many times I've been able to communicate with souls that have crossed over, it changes the way you feel about death. And anything that's along that line has been villainized.
Mhm. Yeah, that kind of brings me to another question, because you know how in certain states they've passed euthanasia laws now, where you can, like in Oregon, you can choose when you want to die. And then there's the debate that, oh well,
I do think there's some certain criteria you have to meet
yeah,
for that, but yes,
yeah,
and
yeah,
Holland has had it for a very.
yeah.
My dad believed in Kevorkian, as he called it,
Mhm.
because when you lose quality of life for
Mhm.
long enough,
Yeah.
we do it for our pets.
Right. Exactly. So there's this the argument is that, well, who are you to play God and you know kill yourself and be euthanized? Only God decides when you die.
It's funny how people use that to take people's choice and power away, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
Because really, that's just taking away your choice and power. Why doesn't everybody have the ability to choose where and how they die? Unless it's something that you can't choose or plan for. But like my father, we knew for 3 years before he was going to die that there was not a dang thing we could do. He was absolutely going to die. And they basically, people don't realize when they put you on hospitals, they basically send you, this is my dad's words. He called it, Cinda, I just got something in the mail. It's Kevorkian in a box, because he was terminally ill cancer patient. for myself, because I have a chronic illness that can be pain. Nobody should ever have to deal with that here on this planet. But at the same time, I also know that I can still get better. And even if I have a bad day, it's not going to, but my family sometimes have to remind me, Cinda, you're not going to get stuck like that. We live in a clean environment now. There's clean air. You're going to get better. Everything's okay. But sometimes I have to be reminded that. But because I have gone through some extreme pain, I am not, I understand it. I don't think people should just leave for the sake of leaving. I don't know about how easily accessible that is. Um,
Well, yeah, because even if you want to die, doesn't mean you're gonna die.
well, no, if you do something like that, you will die.
Well, yeah,
It,
yeah, I know,
it's pretty for sure. But
but well, for sure. But if say you're in too much pain, you wanna, you know,
we had a
you're
gentleman in the neighborhood do it recently, and everybody went by and said goodbye to him his last day. No, but the thing his last day was on its way. It didn't matter if it was that day or if it was a couple days from them, and it completely happened naturally, no matter what. And so it was able to do it on his terms. And it was a very humane way to do things. And he had, he couldn't be active anymore. He couldn't go, but he could visit with his friends the last day that he was alive. But it was actually it was a beautiful celebration. So sometimes it can change the flavor of what's going on. It doesn't all have to be so negative and so bad and so dark. That's just it. So many of these things have been villainized. Death is a feminine trait, by the way. It would be in the feminine category if you sit there and categorize stuff. It is the darkness. It is, and people are afraid of the darkness. But I don't see it as dark because I see it as a very vibrant world because I have been communicating telepathically with invisible beings for pretty well most of my life, even before I knew that that's what I was doing. I do think we choose to come here because it's not quite vibrant enough that we do like to actually come here as much as once we're here, we're like, no, we don't. I wouldn't reincarnate if I wouldn't choose that. Yeah, you probably would. Even me, who's been through some severe pain, yeah, you probably would. And that's just it. A lot of the stuff that guidance, I actually believe is part of the earth and the planet that we live on. And when we are not disconnected by polyester and concrete, and we are actually connected to nature and to the planet, and I do say herself because I do think it's a very feminine quality to do that. We walk differently on this planet than what we do if we are disconnected and feel that we are not a part of it, that we are not of value here. And I think one reason that so many people that are spiritually inclined that are not called to a religious life, they're called to a spiritual life. And one of the reasons why is because most of the religions on our planet today are the patriarchal in nature, and many of us are being called to more Aboriginal type spiritual practices, and they're because they are healing and shamanic in nature, and all of us feel the pain from the toxicity, and we are looking for healing. And I don't say that to appropriate from any culture. I'm saying the cultures that have it, you have the medicine that humanity needs, and it's what we're missing. And it's not right that we're missing it, but that's what restitution needs to be paid. We need to be able to connect with our own divine beings without it being called snake and evil.
yeah, definitely.
I've been kind of feeling moved about some of that, and that's not necessarily just shadow work, it goes a little bit beyond that. But it is interesting how many coincidences, which we now know we call synchronistics. It's that all of us who do have some kind of communication with the divine, a lot of us are called in similar ways. And it's real interesting as we all start coming out of our little honeycomb holes. And oh, you've been doing it too? Oh, you've been doing it too. And we all start buzzing together. And I've been blessed enough to see it, because I talk to so many women and they're like, oh, Isis called me. Oh, Magdalene called me. Whatever that may be, and that we feel called back to symbology, and going from the solar calendar to the lunar calendar, and realizing that you're coming back to nature and following the moon phases, and taking respite, taking a rest when we need it. And that it's not a negative thing and there's nothing to villainize. And we are able to heal and come back to our parasympathetic nervous systems, where we're not caught up in fight or flight all the time. And most women I know on this planet are. I don't know. Host more drum circles. It's okay to host a full moon ceremony with your girlfriends, and guys can come too. I don't want to necessarily alienate, but I do think it's more feminine women are being called to these kinds of things. Don't believe the villainization. That there's a lot of healing to be had, and I love it that a lot of these avenues are reopening. Not only reopening, but we're finding new ones too.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Different ways of new ways of doing things.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
a new balanced way of doing things,
Mm-hmm.
and it allows all of us our emotions, the boys too.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. Well, that's a lovely place to end. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll see you in the next podcast.
Yeah. If anyone would like a private session, syndicate.com. I'm also on all the socials. If you wanted something, throw a topic conversation in there, spit it out. We'd love to hear from you. And
Yes.
click like, share, and all those kind of things.
Yes, indeed. All right. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.